I think that most systems are informed by stories. So the grand narrative of your life or my life or society as a whole, the collective story, as you just said, it's informed by something, by certain beliefs, and those beliefs are extracted from certain experiences that we had. And you can't control everything. Some things just need to emerge, and we just need to be fully present, again, embodied, fully present with that change happening to us, around us, because it's also a natural process. We're not really used to seeing life as a natural process.
Welcome to the podcast The Embodiment Talks, a podcast by the Embodiment Lab with Marion van Opijnen. Taking your role as change agent of societal or education systems requires vision and courage. This podcast will help you take this pioneer's role with more body awareness and confidence, without losing sight of the connection with others. We dive into how we as humans are hardwired, how systems change works, and how both are related. I will take you on my own quest, and I will share background information, talk to experts, and share exercises. We will think, feel, and act. Great that you're here, and happy listening. Here we are today.
Hi.
Shinta. Great, nice, welcome. Welcome in the Embodiment Talks. And I invited you for an interview or a conversation, whatever it's going to look like. We will see as we go. Because what I find really inspiring in your work is how you bring together deep personal work, our true human being in relation to societal change.
Yeah.
And I thought that's a great topic to talk about in this podcast, as that's exactly what this podcast is about as well.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for taking this invitation, and I'm really looking forward to hear your story and your ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And first of all, would you like to say a few words maybe about this very short who you are and what you do?
Sure, yes. It's always, I think, a challenge to adjust that to the audience. But I think I should start with that I'm an economist. But I've also been trained as a psychotherapist, a holistic psychotherapist. So that's what brings societal change and human nature together for me. Mm-hmm. And I've just written a book about a new economy, which I think can only come about if we are inclusive of human nature.
Yeah. Great. I definitely like to hear more about your book, and we will touch upon it as we go. Yay! Yeah, I'll put a link with the show notes.
Sure.
Yeah, great. But as we're talking about the Embodiment Talks, I'd first like to start with the question, what does embodiment mean for you? What is it?
Yeah, I love that question, actually. Firstly, I think that we're so used to living in a fragmented way. So heart, mind, hands, it's all not so much connected. And I think that if we start to connect body or heart, mind, and hands, so the very concrete maybe with the less concrete, the tangible with the less tangible, we start to live in an integrated way. And to me that's what embodiment means, to live fully integrated as a whole human being instead of a fragmented human being who is a persona at work, for example, and a persona at home. And then by living in this way, gaining a lived experience of life. So not only thinking about life, speaking about the way things need to be, or being very mentally focused, but really living by example and living by values, maybe. Yeah, something like that.
And do you feel that you always live by example? Do you live an integrated life yourself? And what does it bring you?
Well, I try to. I do aspire to. But I can see that in some occasions it seems harder than others. So when I was trained as an economist, I was traditionally trained. And you can't help but then, take on a world view that is maybe not so integrated. And you use that worldview, right, to approach life, to approach work. And then something starts to not feel right. Or you get the sense of, is this everything? I think that really happened to me when I was approaching my professional career, and when I was conducting my professional career, and I started to feel this is just one-sided, it's just one way to see life and approach life, and there must be so much more. And then I started exploring, but then I also found that I have these personal a belief system that is very active within me, that tells me how life should be. And then to encounter that belief system and then trying to overcome my beliefs, that's where the real challenge is. And I still, I managed to change that professionally. So from being a traditional economist, I went to become a bit of an unconventional economist, thinking about new economies. And
you call yourself an uneconomist.
Exactly. Eventually saying maybe what I think and feel and how I see the world is very uneconomical. But then again, in my personal life, I encounter the same things, of course. Every situation can trigger that belief system, which then can become really active, and then I need to overcome it again. So however I aspire to live an integrated life or an embodied, live in an embodied sense, I do encounter, as humans do, my limitations. But that's the work. That's the work that we have to do every day.
Yeah. And even from like a very conscious perspective, you say like, okay, I do aspire it, and at the same time I have those moments in my life that I'm triggered and it's difficult. Yes. And maybe like a few hours later or a day later you would think like, that was pretty fragmented.
Yes.
Maybe that wasn't really what I aspire, but then
of course,
so it takes that personal work then to also be able to go back to, okay, what actually is my belief system? How do I want to live?
Yeah, what's my story and where did it come from? And what's true still about that story? Because a lot of those elements in that story are not true anymore. No. They might have been true at some point, or they might have been functional at some point. For example, in childhood. But they might not be functional anymore in adulthood.
And what do you mean by story? Because I saw that a lot on your website and in some of the podcasts that I listened from you as well. You talk about the narrative and the story. Why is it so important for you to look at your story, but maybe also to look at our collective story?
Yeah, story of society, that society tells itself. Yeah, I think that most systems are informed by stories. So the grand narrative of your life or my life or society as a whole, the collective story, as you just said, it's informed by something, by certain beliefs. and those beliefs are extracted from certain experiences that we had. So as children, we had experiences. We drew conclusions from those experiences. And as children, we have just maybe two grand needs, which is to be taken care of and to be loved. So to be taken care of very physically, emotionally also, but to be loved is a bit more the emotional aspect, and to be taken care of is to really be fed and to be clean and to be healthy. And if that doesn't happen, or there's some distortion in that experience, then we draw conclusions, which later on can actually grow into characters, and in the way we behave and the way we act in the world. And as adults, we create, the world from those stories if we are unconscious, if we stay unconscious about those conclusions that we drew years ago. So that sets the informative fundament for a society, which then can become a cultural construct. So if we, to be more concrete, if we draw conclusions as children and we start to say, okay, I need a strategy to survive, so I will adjust my behavior and I will maybe adjust it in such a way that I leave a part of me which is very natural and authentic, I leave it behind. So I'm always secured of the love that I need, or the care that needs to be that I need to be provided with. And we grow into adults remaining in the same narrative, then we create a fragmented society.
So you actually say, like, because each of us individually, we have our own stories that we bring in all the relations that we have, and with all those relations we create a certain culture, we create a societal system, and that makes us fragmented. What I wonder is this the only way to create a fragmented system? I mean, I just inquire into this, maybe you don't have the cut and clear answer as well, but then it's nice also to inquire into it maybe. But if we create a fragmented system through our stories, our individual stories, then new people coming into that system already end up in a system that's fragmented.
Yeah.
So then it's not just their individual story, but it's also the story that they come into, that they're born into, or that they migrate to, or whatever. So how does that kind of work together, those individual stories and then I'm coming back to the collective story as well.
Yeah.
And is that always an individual story, or could that be like a collective story as well? Does it work the same in the collective as it does in the individual? What would be your inquiry into that?
Well, firstly, I think that the fragmentation, it happens as soon as we conclude that we should leave an authentic part behind. So, and can start really early. So the most formative years are the first 7 years, right? From conception on until about 7 years. And then a new cycle starts, which is practically the same cycle. So in that period, this is from theory by Wilhelm Reich, who has described character structures. Very fundamental, of course, to a psychological approach. If we speak about this and societal change, I think it's very valuable to highlight this dimension, which is not very mainstream to do. But so we start fragmenting very early on already, which means leaving an authentic part behind, leaving true values behind. Narrowing that what we live in order to survive. So it has a very relevant motivation to it. And it doesn't mean that we all had a miserable childhood. That doesn't mean it at all. But if we are born into a society that, for example, dismisses you because of how you perform in school, in primary school, then you can already draw that conclusion for yourself. I'm not good enough, or I don't belong here, I don't fit in, I don't have a place, I have no right of being here, I can't be my authentic self and be creative in my expression of myself. For example, it's a very, very mainstream topic, of course, of public debate, how schools are, or educational systems, can be very limiting to a person growing into a whole human being, or facilitating, you becoming fully yourself and fulfilling your true potential. So the fragmentation starts there already. And if there's no healing, so becoming whole on that part, then you grow into an adult like that. And then you take on this character. And then indeed you build society, you cooperate to build society in such a way, and you invite your children, when you have children, in this world with all these rules, written and unwritten rules. And it's very hard for an individual to come into this system, to arrive into this system, and then start questioning it. Because again, your survival depends on you living and playing by the rules. So it's very intricate, and it's very, it's almost super courageous if you start questioning that system, whether you're 4 years old or you're 40 years old, it doesn't really matter. But to do that, it takes a lot of courage, a lot of strength, and you will have to find like-mindeds, because you're up against a force field, which is very grand, of course. It's a cultural construct. So that's why it's so difficult to change the system. And it's impossible maybe even to just change the system by just objecting to it and thinking about it. And that's why I like that you called your podcast Embodiment Talks. Because what you need to do is to live something else by example right next to that cultural construct, right? It's building a new cultural construct, which is maybe based on a more whole idea of life, not only of being human, but of life as a whole. So the planetary life that we speak of, the animal life, all kinds of life.
Yeah, and when you say we need to build a new cultural construct, should it be next to our current culture, what I see a lot of pioneers do, or how do we integrate both? Or is it really a separate construct?
It kind of happens, I think. In transition theory, there's the existing regime and there's the upcoming regime, right? And then at some point, they collide. These forces collide, and then there's chaos.
Which in the moment, I think there's a lot of chaos.
Which we might have been in.
A lot of experiment chaos,
Yeah, I think so. And maybe we've been experiencing chaos for a very long time already, even before we were born. I don't know. I don't know how long transition actually take. But so this is a theory, right? There's an emergent force of the new, which challenges the existing. And I think that's something that's always there, because every system is always in a certain movement, right? It's always dynamic. And it always seeks its fullest potential to be fulfilled. And then it changes. When it becomes irrelevant, or when it's done its task, then it's ready to take on a different shape. And I think that as humans, we've been a part of our cultural construct, or the narrative, the grand story of our culture, is that we need to control things. or need to be able to anticipate on things. And so we kind of take on these mechanistic approaches to life, which are not really the most fitting approaches, right? Because life happens and there's a lot of messy stuff in life, and on a personal level, but also in your professional world. And you can't control everything. Some things just need to emerge, and we just need to be fully present, again, embodied, fully present with that change happening to us, around us, because it's also a natural process, but we're not really used to seeing life as a natural process. We see life as something that we need to manage, or we need to control, and we need to measure, and we need to be accountable for stuff. And again, that's a fragmented way, a mechanistic way, a linear way of looking at life and at systems. But if we dare to see it as a living system, and we dare to anticipate on it as a living system, which we are ourselves as well, then we can see how change can come about, and that it's much more organic and much more part of what life is than that it has to be a threat.
So how would you describe the new narrative? What would be some key words or key aspects in that?
The first word that comes to mind is regeneration, regenerative.
And what does that mean for you if we look at a regenerative world?
Well, if you look at how we've conducted, for example, something that I've been much involved in, our economic system. So we've approached it from, for example, from just an extractive point of view. So we take from nature and we change what we take from nature into something that we can use. And that's it. And then we use it for a while, or we consume it for a while. It doesn't matter what it is. It can be anything. And that's it. There's the story to that is the grand storyline to that is that extraction is just the way it goes and is okay. Now, regeneration takes into account that what we take needs to be restored. So you view much more from a holistic point of view. Okay, I need something as a human being, and I need it from nature, but I am obliged, there's a responsibility there for me to be reciprocal and to provide the care for nature to be able to restore. So I can, again, consume what I need, yet honor the delicate balance for nature, to the living world, to provide me with that, or to be alive at all. So that's I think, well, I would think that's the most important.
And what's the role of embodiment in that?
It's coming back into relationship with the world outside of us, I think. So the extraction bit, when we believe extraction is okay and I'm not responsible for the cost of it, then I've placed myself higher upon the ladder, maybe, or in a certain position as a human being that makes me, I would almost say, better than nature. Well,
because we think that even if we do something to nature, we can repair it with technology or something like that. So
or not repair it at all.
Well, yeah,
but
now we get into that, like, okay, we maybe have to repair something if we do something wrong.
Yes.
That's what like mainstream sustainability is about.
Yes. And, well, sustainability is about doing a little bit less
bad,
terrible.
Exactly. Yeah.
And regeneration is really doing things much better and
giving back, maybe even
bringing yourself into the relationship of this ecosystem. So becoming again part of that of that ecosystem. That's what I mean with bringing yourself into relationship. Is that humans, animals, plants, whatever, we all have a part to play. And if we can value that part for what it is, it's different parts that we play. If we can value that part for what it is, but also honor the dynamics and the reciprocity between it, then we find our righteous position, I think, as humankind.
And if you would bring that back to yourself, to make it a more concrete, maybe, like what is the role that you play in this creating a new narrative? Because you say, like, if we all go back to who we are as an individual, as a human, and bring that all together, we create a system that has a certain place in the larger system.
Yeah.
And but that also makes it, I have to take it back to myself, like what is the role that I have to play in this system?
Yeah.
So what would be your role that you are playing in this system to create a new narrative?
Yeah. Nice question. I think when I started to feel there must be more, I think that's a question a lot of people ask themselves. I think there's a responsibility in when you ask yourself that question to really answer it. Mm-hmm. So to show up in that space that you've just created. Is there something more? There should be something more, something that doesn't feel right. And then to investigate. So I think I've taken up that investigation. And by taking up that investigation, which is very personal, of course, I've kind of committed, I think, to exchanging the belief system that I had for something else that wasn't clear to me at all from the start. But I'm also giving up certainties that I thought that I had, which ended up not being so certain. Because life doesn't provide you, not from the outside with certainties, it's from the inside, of course. But then to take up that investigation and then being ready to exchange an existing belief system for something new. And when that shows up, the new belief system, it showed up to me as something that what's the main idea? It's you start to feel at some point, oh my goodness, I want to live from the heart, for example. I want to live what I feel. I want to fulfill my potential. And it's very vague in the beginning. It's just a sense of something. But then to really stay present with that and then give it time to emerge even more into concrete ideas of what you can do and how you can then shape your life and then acting on that. You know, it's like a whole process, I think, which is applicable to anybody. And to me, it took a very long time to see and look and look and look even more and closer and being in doubt and being in fear of it never becoming concrete. But then all of a sudden, you know, it lands or something happens.
What was that moment for you that it
landed? It's a good question. That's a very good question, because I think there were certain occasions that you start to feel, now I can act, and I don't know what it's going to provide me with, what kind of experience, but you might see a new training course that you want to participate in, and you don't know what kind of, you don't know why really, and you don't know what you'll be doing with that. Or you meet new people that are at the same level of either investigation, or you find certain people inspiring that are already doing something that is in line with their values. You just end up places, right? If you start acting. And then all of a sudden, things drop. So you get these opportunities that you can either jump on. And I think that writing the book was really one of my biggest opportunities. So when Kees approached me, I was interviewing him actually.
Yeah.
And he approached me and he said, do you want to write this book together? I immediately felt, yes, I should be doing this. And it took me out into a completely new realm of what I had long before that felt as a deep desire to bring to the world. And now it had a concrete form. It is a book, and the writing of it really changed me further, which it was an initiation process, much more than just a production thing. It was really embodying what I had been thinking about, and how beautiful the world would be with a new economic system, but really diving into it and writing about it and thinking about it and speaking about it, and then really taking it in. That was for me an embodiment process. So now I feel I've written this book with Kees, and we're fully embodying the change that we were firstly foreseeing or feeling or longing for. And but I couldn't say, 5 years ago, then and then I'll be writing this book, and then, this journey will come to an end or whatever. Yeah. Because it's not, of course, it's still ongoing. Yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I'm just curious because you say now we really embody the material. So what was a concept before, by writing the book and really diving into it and talking to people, speaking about it, and made me embody it. And how do you notice that difference between embodying the story, the narrative, and talking about concepts? How do you notice that inside yourself?
I think that when you envision something, or you really long for something, and it's a vision in your mind or in your heart, it's still up for debate in some way within yourself. So you might still feel that you can make certain concessions to that vision.
So it's maybe this, or maybe that could make sense as well. For example, like that process when it still is like more in a conceptual phase.
Could be, and what I've also experienced is that belief that we need to always be able to bridge the gap between the old and the new. So we often say that, right? Change makers often say that, or people that are in organizational change, society change in whole. We often say we need to be able to connect to whatever is mainstream or whatever is the old world, and I've really that's what I mean with concessions. You're still willing to translate your new ideas into old constructs. But when you start to embody that newness, and when you start to embody that new vision and start to live that new vision, there's this radical commitment to it that you can't explain it, or you can't translate it anymore into old constructs. So you can't do any concessions to it anymore. It's like this radical personal commitment to it. Like, now I belong to this new vision, right? Yeah. It's and I give myself to it, so I'm in service of it more than I need to validate it. It's unapologetically.
Wow. Yeah. And how does that work in your daily work? If you say I'm more at surface to it, then I have to convince others or tell it. So how has it changed your work?
Well, radically too. I think it's a cooperative game that we play. So there's my individual motivation to live this new economy, for example, or these new values that could inform a new economy. And the system that is open and ready for it, to be changed. So my message now, I think, is much better received than maybe 10 years ago. So there's an interplay there. But what I am experiencing personally, so I don't do any concessions anymore. I'm just embodying this new vision that I have, and that's also the only thing that you can ask of me. Just what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So sometimes...
So it's also like you can't do it anymore.
Yes.
The other thing.
You're not aligned to the old anymore.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean that you've done away with it. Which doesn't mean you've discarded it. But you just say, okay, so that was that, and this is now. And then the things that I do, the things that I get asked for, so teaching, advising, training, whatever it is, it's all focused on that new vision. Because I put it out there, then people can recognize that as, that's something that she's doing, and we can ask her about that. But if I would be willing to... That's what we talked about early on in this conversation. So you build a new construct next to the old construct, instead of trying to change the old construct.
Yeah. So it's actually the example that you build.
I think so. Yeah.
And at somewhere I heard you talk about internalizing, and is this the process of that you now describe on writing the book and what it brought to you on how you internalized the whole new narrative? And then I take internalizing as embodying, but is that what you mean by internalizing?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's a really valid way of looking at it. It is an internalization, right? It's it's really taking it in and as your own, and then living it out again. So yeah. I think so.
Wow, great, beautiful. And it's also on your homepage, where you say a new reality is lived into being.
Yeah.
And it's also where you now describe actually and how everything came to life in your being by writing the book and going through that whole process.
Yeah.
So it's nice how you kind of put that into example. Maybe you haven't realized that yourself yet.
Well, you remind me of what's on my website again.
Yeah.
But it was meant that way, indeed. Yeah. And I think that with every day, that it's a practice every day to do that. Yeah.
What I was wondering as well, when you wrote the book and talking about this connection, the embodiment in relation to societal change, how did you recognize, and probably many of the authors used other terminology to kind of say similar things, but how do you see that those authors reflect, or I think it's essays. So you asked them to write the essays, or did you interview them and wrote them, or how
it's a bit of both. Yeah.
How do you see, in more a common sense of what they say, how that more alignment, the integration that you spoke about in the beginning of this talk, the embodiment is about the integration of your mind, your heart, your body, your hands. How did that come back in those different stories or views that the participants in your book spoke about, their view on the new economy? Did it come back, and how?
So you're asking me if they've embodied their stories?
Yeah,
Is that right?
and whether that is part of their new narrative, that we need to embody it, that we need to come to that personal process to start living a new reality. Is there a certain common in that?
I don't know. That's a really interesting question, actually. None of them describe it as we are speaking about it, as explicitly as we are speaking about it now. But there is a recognition of this human assignment, right? I'm calling it a human assignment. So, what they've all done and what they are doing, so what I see in them personally, is that they are really taking up their responsibility. So their dedication to creating the new is very real. It's very tangible. You can see it in their work, in the way they speak, the way they act, that they really and truly believe in what they've written down. So they are taking their human assignment very seriously. But none of them have highlighted how to approach that for other people. You know, how to approach that for other people. They have not highlighted their own personal journey in such a way. I was really interested. Some of the people that have contributed, we've indeed spoken to. I was really very interested in their personal motivation to do the work as they do, to think about a new economy in such a radical way that we thought this needs to be shared with the world, because there's so many beautiful other perspectives that move from community, cooperation, reciprocity, regeneration that we just spoke about, sacredness even, you know, from these new ideas that are so recognizable from a human point of view, but are unrecognizable if we just look at a system as it is. So they've really taken on that courage to become an authority in that field. So I think they've really embodied it, but they don't talk about it that way. They don't claim any part in that way, which might be, you know, it's very. They're all very humble and just enthusiastic about sharing their vision with the world. That to me is already very large contribution to change.
Yeah, being humble also does something to the ego.
Yeah.
And if we really truly embody something, then from my perspective, the ego becomes less important and probably more a conscious instrument than something that is
you need your ego, right?
Yeah, you need it. Yeah, but if we're not conscious on it, it kind of shouts over whatever we do and it plays its part. Whereas if we can use it as a conscious instrument, which then if you're humble, you can kind of put it in play when you need it and not when you don't need it. So you can also play with that ego part.
Yeah.
Which needs embodiment, I think.
Exactly.
Because you can't just there can't be a thought construct to be humble. You can't be humble from thought, because then it's not authentic.
No, I need my ego to direct my energy.
Yeah.
Right. So something can be an idea in my mind, but I need my ego to be able to act upon that idea and then really produce something, manifest something. So do the actual production process of it. But if I then claim it to be my own, and to claim it to be my brilliance that has produced that, that might be taking it a step too far and then becoming egocentric about that. While that's what I really love about, for example, Charles Eisenstein from the book. He speaks of the fact, and David Bollier, by the way, also, they speak of the fact that they didn't come up with anything, that whatever they've produced is a result of a collective gaining of ideas and producing or putting something out in the world and then learning from that. And so it's the creative process is not their own, but they become an instrument So they embody the creativity to be able to make something very concrete out of an idea. And they're very, very humble in that sense of not claiming it as something that is of themselves and for themselves.
Yeah, and that's about that role that we spoke about before as well. So what's my role in that whole system?
Yeah.
And all those roles are kind of equally important. And
Yeah.
sometimes this role, this person with this role jumps out, and then some other time it's that person. But in the end, we are all in that, like in an equal way. And they kind of stood up because they had a certain role to play to come to change.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that makes it kind of a humble, like, okay, you know, it's now just me playing this role, but tomorrow it could be somebody else.
Yeah. And then you see that people can take a natural authority, take on that natural authority about the domain in which they are an expert in, for example. So I think that's fascinating, that when people are not claiming their expertise as just their own, but are willing to commit to it and have it evolved, then you're in service of something, right? And I think that that is what Kees and I try to do with the book, to say we have this deep, 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 deep longing for a new system that reflects much more of human nature, that attunes and aligns much more with what is healthy and relevant and sensible than what it is now, our capitalistic approach. And we've read all these stories about, and all these people that have already had these beautiful ideas, put them into a certain perspective, into a certain framework, even researched it academically even. This is information that we need to share so the emergent news story can come up. So we've put ourselves into service of that. It's not our own, but the way we've handled it and the way we've described it and the way that we've put it in a certain form and are putting it in a certain form, so teaching about it as well, for example, that's maybe our own, but it's always in service of something else. And I think that is what carries this forward so much more than if we were to say, look at how well we've done. We've come up with these great ideas. Because that's not how life works, right? There's so much wisdom that's just up in the air.
And it's great to acknowledge that you need the stories and the narratives of all those people that you've interviewed and that wrote essays for the book to be able to do what you do now yourself.
Exactly.
Like we're always standing on the shoulders of others.
Exactly.
Even that we're standing on the shoulders of the old system.
Yes.
So maybe it's even not that we put them next to it, but that
you just evolve.
You evolve,
yeah. And that's a beautiful way, I think, of seeing it, to stand upon the shoulders of the people that have come before, or the system that was previous to the new system. And then you can honor it. And then you can start really to walk the path that we really, I think, need to be walking, is to reflect on it. And then in humility say, that was then, it's not working anymore, so let's come up with a new story. And I really grieve maybe the losses that we've suffered along the way, because it has cost us something. It has really brought us a lot of things, like wealth in society, material wealth, social wealth as well, but it has cost us a lot as well. And we
what is
don't
the
really...
cost that we paid? And I know it's not monetized cost, but what is it? What has it cost us, this system?
Well, look at the rates of burnouts. It's costing us our mental health and our physical
health as well. Yeah.
So if
so it's costing us our own nature, actually, in that sense, our physical nature, like the system that we are.
Yes.
If we just look at the body.
Indeed. That exactly.
Yeah.
It's costing us our wholeness. But we have an option. We can heal. We can heal, but we don't heal a system. We heal ourselves, and by that, a system is healed. And with, you can replace the word healing with becoming more whole, becoming more integrated, becoming holistic, whatever you think is suitable. Not it it not being deprived anymore of its existentiality. So the existential nature of system then becomes much more visible and tangible to be able to work with and integrated and inclusive thereof. And I think that's extremely important, is that it becomes human again, you know. And now it's just mechanistic, and we're not mechanisms.
So rehumanizing the system.
Rehumanizing, or maybe even not rehumanizing, but putting life at its center again. So life in all its forms, because it's also about the welfare of the living world as a whole. And we are not only the living world.
Yeah, because then you view like rehumanizing as we make ourselves centric to the system. Whereas if we look at rehumanizing from a perspective that we need a healthy system of which we are just one of those players, as I just say, like we all play our role. It's like as humanity, we play a role in a larger system as well, which is equally important as any other role in that system.
Yeah.
So then the whole is kind of part of like rehumanizing it. It makes me inquire into why do I use the word rehumanizing, because I don't see it as putting ourselves at the center. Although I also realize on my LinkedIn I have like rehumanizing education system, where of course the education system is for us humans, and that needs to be to like how we human size, our rehumanized.
Well, aligned to human nature, maybe more than it is now.
Yeah, maybe that is a nice word too.
Yeah. Well, in economics or an economical system, it applies to so much more than just humans. It applies to the resources that are being put into that system and then being produced into something. It's not inclusive of that at all. It's even further away from that truth, because we've applied all these kinds of mathematical models to not include them. While in fact we are highly dependent on the living world for an economy to function, for people to function at all. So that's what I would say, that in the book we've said ecology, it needs to be much, much more about ecology, and in fact economics should be an applied form of ecology. It's just rules.
And only one of the forms, because there's much more to ecology than just economics.
Much more, of course, but that's
so
why
economy is only one of the roles in
and
the
economy
whole...
is just a way of organizing a society. That's so you just apply the rules, or you organize it in such a way that it honors ecological processes, and then I think we're much more on the right track than we are now, where economy is, or growth within an economic system is our main goal.
How far away are we from this? In creating that new... Are you optimistic or pessimistic or something in between?
Yes. We're not far away from it at all. We're already doing it. We're already doing it. It's just not highlighted. That's also one of the reasons to write a book about it. It's not mainstream to think about alternatives to a capitalistic system, but there are so many alternatives already. So many.
Yeah.
So we've spoken about the commons, or commoning, as a way to approach the economy in our book. You see, well, I think we're already there. I think that there's so many. That's why we've written this book. It's just not mainstream. We're already living this new system into being, right? There's so many examples already of, for example, we mentioned commoning as a way to reconceptualize the economy, and there's so many already beautiful business models that illustrate how commoning can come about, or degrowth, or regenerative agriculture, for example, is a beautiful example of regeneration. So it's already there. It just needs to be talked about more, I think.
Okay, so that's very hopeful then. Yeah.
I am really hopeful. Yeah.
Great. Besides, of course, that people can read your book, which I would definitely recommend if you're watching this. I'd also like to know what other tips could you give to people as a closing question to participate or to contribute to creating that new system, and to really go, like what we spoke about before, that to go through that process of really embodying the new narrative. So what is it that you could recommend people to start really embodying that world that they actually envision?
Mm-hmm. Well, the way we approach working with groups on this topic is not only sharing the knowledge that you can indeed read in our book, in other books, all kinds of books, but then also doing the personal work. So really diving into what is uncomfortable about how things are now, and what we feel about that, and then really claiming the change that we long for as a call to action. But that's a personal process. So it's like an initiation process into the doing. It's not just, go ahead and do something. That's where embodiment, I think, is so important. We can complain about something, and we can reflect critically on how things are, or how the world works. But that's just projection, right?
And makes us a kind of a victim to the system as well, whereas we are part of it.
Exactly. So when we bring ourselves into a relationship to what we are observing outside of ourselves, and then really internalizing it, so embodying how uncomfortable it feels, or how it's hurting us, or just our emotional reactions, and then really looking into that, taking the responsibility that is ours, then we are able to transform that into a appropriate action. And that's how I think we create a new world. So it's like an outside inner, an outside inside.
You also make that lemniscate.
Yeah, exactly. It's a process.
To do it. Yeah. Okay, great. And you say, like, in the group work, so there's groups that you do, or how can people get in touch with you as well if they want to?
Yeah, both Kees and I, we facilitate an Economics for Change course that highlights both the new perspectives of a new economy, but then also facilitates the process of people really embodying their change makership.
Okay, wow. Yeah. And is there a website or?
School for Change.
School for Change.
.nl, I think, or .com.
I will look it up and put it in the show notes.
That would be great. But it's very hopeful that a lot of business schools are also changing the curriculum, but also the teaching process.
Yeah, that's what I'm involved in.
Exactly.
Business schools. Yeah.
And I've heard a lot of not a lot, but some teachers even speak about embodied learning. Yeah. So that's to me so hopeful that we are able now to teach students in such a way that they really become the change that they want to see in the world. So.
Yeah, and to become whole again, because I always say, like, you go into the education system as a whole human and you come out as a 1/3 human. Because we disregard so many parts of ourselves in the whole learning process, and how we, our narrative about what education should look like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
and it can be such a force for good, for wholeness, indeed.
Yeah. But great. So the School of Change. Or the School for Change?
School for Change, yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you'd have loved to talk about and that we didn't talk about?
Well, do we answer the question of the embodiment? You mentioned that this is a
embodiment?
whole process of answering the question, what is embodiment? A journey that
world.
I'm on as well. Yeah. Did we come close to contributing to answer it?
I think so. Yeah, I think you gave some very clear answers on about the integration process, and that it is a process, and also like embodiment doesn't have an ending point, or now I'm embodied. What does that mean? You know, to it's a process of, you know, which you go through all and over again, and then something new comes, and there's a new process of embodying that. But it's interesting, like how you brought that whole integration of what we do and what we think very much alive in this conversation. So thank you for that.
Good.
And it also gave me some insights on, okay, where am I at on this journey of, I mean, part of my process, I'm not such a writer, so but at one point I thought, okay, let this be my book, this podcast, to write, and it's part of my own process in embodying the combination of embodiment in relation to societal change, and so your reflections gave input to me again as well to inquire into that deeper. So thank you for that.
Okay.
And I really enjoyed talking to you. It's always a nice and a pleasure to do. Thank you. And I wish you all the best with the last few weeks of your pregnancy and bringing this new citizen on this planet.
Yes.
So
great.
Thank you. Thank you. Great that you listened to this episode of the Embodiment Talks. Please let me know your thoughts about this episode or the insights that you gained. Email me to the address in the show notes. If you want to get in touch with me, or if you have a question or topic that you want to know more about, don't hesitate to send me an email as well. Do you want to be kept up to date? Like this podcast in your favorite podcast app. You can help me by giving a thumbs up or leaving a comment so that this podcast will reach more people. You can find more information about my work on my website www.embodimentlab.nl or my YouTube channel Embodiment Lab. Thanks for listening, and meet you at the next episode.